I sat in my car for 2 hours staring at my wife's car parked outside an apartment I never knew existed. She had told me she was working late again. Same excuse she'd used for months. But there it was, her car sitting in the guest lot of a studio complex in a part of the city she had no reason to be in, and I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands started to hurt. Because in that moment, I stopped wondering whether something was wrong and started asking myself a much worse question. How long had my wife been living a second life without me? My name is Daniel and my wife is Claire. I'm 32, she's 30. We've been married for 6 years, together for 8, and until last week I would have told you we had a solid marriage. Not perfect, not some fantasy, just steady. We had a system that made sense. One joint bank account for the mortgage, utilities bills, groceries, all the shared stuff. Then separate personal accounts for whatever each of us wanted to spend on our own. It felt reasonable, healthy, even. We trusted each other, so the separation never felt suspicious. At least not to me. We had routines, weekdays that blurred into each other, shared responsibilities, familiar jokes, the kind of marriage where you stop performing love all the time because you think its presence is already understood. That was my view of us. And if I'm honest, I liked that version of our life. It felt adult, stable built. Then I opened the filing cabinet looking for one receipt and found a bank statement from an account she had never really mentioned using. And from that point on, everything started changing shape. I know people will say I should have put the statement back. Maybe they're right. But when you find something hidden inside your own house, something that clearly belongs to your spouse and clearly wasn't meant to be lying in plain sight, curiosity doesn't feel like some moral failure. It feels like survival. So I looked. There were recurring monthly charges, big ones. Around $1,400 each every month paid to a rental management company. Not once, not random. Recurring, regular, established. The kind of payment pattern that tells you this was not some impulsive mistake or one temporary emergency. This had structure. I stared at the page for a long time, trying to come up with another explanation. Maybe it was for a family member. Maybe she was helping someone quietly. Maybe it was connected to work somehow. Maybe it was an investment I didn't know about. Maybe there was some boring answer that would make me feel ridiculous for panicking. That is where the mind goes first, isn't it? I want you to remember this moment. When the first crack appears, most people don't immediately accept the worst. They start building softer possibilities because the truth is too expensive to touch all at once. You become a lawyer for the person already lying to you. You search for innocence on their behalf, and that is exactly what I was doing. Then I looked up the address tied to the rental company. Studio apartment complex, other side of the city. A place my wife had absolutely no reason to be. Not near her work, not near friends, not near family. Just a studio apartment in a location that made no sense unless it was supposed to make no sense. And suddenly the last 4 months looked different. Claire had been working late every Tuesday and Thursday for months. Not once in a while, not during some busy season. Regularly, predictably, I had accepted it because adults work late sometimes. Jobs get demanding. Deadlines pile up. You trust the person you married when they tell you where they are. Why wouldn't you? She had seemed a little more tired lately, a little less present, sometimes distracted at dinner, sometimes replying half a second too late, like she was coming back from somewhere else mentally. But none of that was dramatic enough to set off alarm bells. It just looked like life. That's what makes these things so ugly. Real betrayal rarely arrives dressed like betrayal. It hides inside normality. At the time, I had no idea what this meant. Was she renting it for herself? For someone else? Was she using it alone? Was someone meeting her there? Was it for sex? Was it for escape? Was it temporary? Permanent? Was she planning to leave me and just hadn't said the words yet? My mind kept cycling through possibilities, and every single one of them made me feel sicker than the last. Because $1,400 a month is not nothing. People do not quietly spend that kind of money for no reason. Not for 4 months. Not while sharing a mortgage with someone. That kind of money means commitment. It means a decision made over and over again. It means a part of her life had become organized around secrecy. And once I saw that, the whole marriage started to look unstable in retrospect. Not fake. That would almost be easier, but unstable. Like a house that looked fine until somebody pointed out the crack in the foundation. And now you can't stop seeing it. Yesterday evening, I drove there. I didn't tell myself I was going to confront her. I wasn't that brave. I told myself I just needed to know whether the address was real in any lived sense. Whether this was truly connected to her, or whether I was still somehow missing some ordinary explanation. Then I saw her car, parked in the guest lot. That was it. That was the end of doubt. I pulled over across from the building and just sat there. I remember looking at the car first, then the entrance, then back at the car again, like I needed to keep confirming it was actually hers. Same plate, same scratch near the bumper, same little sticker on the back window she never bothered removing. My wife was there, not at work, not stuck late in some meeting, not buried in emails, there, in front of an apartment I never knew existed. And what I found next changed everything. Not because I saw her with another person, I didn't. What changed everything was the 2-hour silence that followed. I stayed in my car while my mind started rearranging my whole life around this new fact. She had lied about where she was, and whatever happened behind that door was real enough that she had been maintaining a second location for months. Do you know what that does to your sense of reality? It's one thing to suspect cheating. It's another thing entirely to discover architecture around it. Rent, timing, location, routine. This wasn't just a lie, it was infrastructure. She had built something, maybe a hideout, maybe a relationship, maybe a private version of herself that existed somewhere beyond my reach. And I had been sitting at home calling that absence working late. I kept asking myself the same question. Was she living a double life? Because hookups are one thing. Ugly, yes. Disgusting, yes. But random. This felt different. This felt regular. Habitable. Thought through. If you rent a place for months, you aren't just sneaking around. You're making room in your life for secrecy to settle in. That thought made me physically sick. I sat there watching the entrance and never found the nerve to go up. I won't pretend otherwise. I didn't storm in. I didn't demand answers. I didn't become some fearless version of myself just because the truth was sitting in front of me. I froze. My hands were shaking. Not in some dramatic way. Just enough that I noticed I kept clenching and unclenching them. I felt cold, then hot, then numb. A car would pass and I'd look up like maybe something had changed. But nothing changed. The building stayed there. Her car stayed there. The lie stayed there. I want you to remember this moment. A lot of people imagine discovery as a loud event, screaming, running upstairs, bang on the door, demand the truth. But sometimes discovery is quiet. Sometimes it is just one person sitting in a parked car, realizing the life they thought they were living is no longer available to them. And that kind of quiet can be brutal. When she finally came home later that night, she acted completely normal. That may have been the part that unsettled me most. She came in, set down her bag, moved around the kitchen like she had done nothing strange, and asked me what I wanted for dinner. Dinner. As if she hadn't just spent hours at a hidden apartment while I sat across town trying not to throw up from the implications. How do you speak normally after that? How do you ask your husband about dinner when he has just watched your car sitting outside a secret place he was never supposed to find? The calmness of it made me feel even more alien in my own house. I kept looking at her face, wondering how much practice it takes to lie that smoothly. And once that thought entered my mind, everything became contaminated. Her voice, her touch, her ordinary little movements around the house. Every part of normal life started looking like performance. I still haven't confronted her. That is the truth. And maybe some people will think that makes me weak. Maybe it does. But I need to be honest about where I am in this story. I am not standing on the other side of it with a speech prepared and a clean answer in hand. I am in the middle of it, still breathing through it, still deciding how to break my own life open. What I have done instead is gather what I can. Bank statements, address, dates, the pattern of Tuesdays and Thursdays, the image of her car sitting outside that building. I keep telling myself I need more evidence, but maybe what I really need is more time. Time to let the shock settle into something I can act from. Because what exactly do you say first? Why do you have a second apartment? Who's there with you? Are you leaving me? Has any part of our marriage been real for the last 4 months? Every possible first question feels inadequate compared to the size of what I think I found. At the time I had no idea what this meant, and honestly part of me still doesn't. Maybe she's having an affair. Maybe she has been living another life entirely. Maybe she uses that place to become someone I know nothing about. Maybe she's already halfway out of this marriage, and I am the only person who hasn't admitted it yet. I replay last night constantly. Her asking about dinner, her moving around our kitchen, her standing close to me like her body had not just come from another place I was never supposed to know about. Every time she touched my arm, I felt sick. Not because I suddenly hate her, because I don't know what I am touching anymore. Wife, stranger, Leon, all three. That is what betrayal does before confrontation. It splits the person in front of you into versions. There is the one you married, the one you lived with, the one paying a second rent in secret, the one asking you what you want to eat, and your mind starts trying to fit them into one body again, but it can't, not cleanly. I want you to remember this moment. Sometimes the hardest part is not the argument. It is the waiting room before the argument, where every ordinary interaction becomes unbearable because both people are technically in the same marriage, but only one of them still thinks truth belongs inside it. And I am living in that waiting room right now. So where am I now? Still in the same house, still next to the same person, still carrying information she does not know I have. And if that sounds miserable, that's because it is. I feel like a guest in my own home, not just because of what she may have done, but because the emotional geography has changed. Nothing feels shared anymore. Even the house feels different. The bed feels different. The kitchen feels different. The filing cabinet where I found the statement feels like some small accidental doorway into the truth. I walk past normal objects and think, I used to believe we both lived in the same reality. Now I'm not sure we even lived in the same marriage. That is hard to admit. I keep circling the same conclusion. Whatever that apartment is, it matters. Too much money. Too much planning. Too much repetition. 4 months is not chaos. It is design, and design means intention. That part I cannot explain away anymore. I do not know yet whether this ends in confrontation, divorce, some confession I cannot even imagine, or a truth stranger than the one I have already built in my head. But I know trust is already damaged in a way that may not survive the answer. Because even if the least awful explanation somehow turned out to be true, and I cannot currently imagine what that would be, she still lied for months about where she was. That alone changes things. Because marriage is not just sex or fidelity in the narrow sense. It is location. It is habit. It is where your life is when your partner asks where you've been. It is the basic dignity of not making them share a home with a lie they cannot name yet. I would rather hear something brutal than keep living like this. And that tells me more than I want to know. Sometimes the real betrayal is not just the affair you suspect, but the hidden life that proves your marriage was never being lived by both people in the same way. Let me know in the comments, did they deserve it, or did this go too far? And if you've been through something similar, share your story below.